I would like now to introduce our speakers for today. Bruce Stowe and Nancy Kline have done research on famous people from Putnam County. There probably are a lot of other ones that could be included, but these are the ones that they put into their presentation. And they also have a book. Bruce, you want to hold that up? This is a book for children.
You can purchase this on the way out.
About famous people, Putnam County. I could write it each week. Well, I have to be honest with you, I thought it would last 2 weeks because I didn't know too many famous people. I knew, an actor from Columbus Grove, and I knew about the lady on TV, and that's all I knew. So when he approached me, and I'm like, sure, I can make room for 2 weeks. It went on several weeks, okay? And Bruce is going to tell you about how he did the research, but I'm going to just end up at the other end real quick. After we saw these stories, one of the things we said to ourselves was, so many kids in Putnam County think, I'm just from Putnam County. I have 35 kids graduated with my class. What can I do? We said, wouldn't it be neat if we could put a book together to show these kids, how these kids started out in Putnam County, and some of them never even went to school. They were homeschooled, okay? And he's going to tell you some of these. They went on to be governors. They went on to be famous astronomers. They went on to be sports heroes. We decided to do this book to encourage kids of today, because so many kids, I don't know if any of you know what Ohio is considered. We're called a flyover state. Does anybody know what that is? Have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of it.
People think you start out in New York and go to Washington or something like that. Yeah, it's a flyover state, meaning it's not worth it stopping here. Nothing good ever comes from here. Well, it does. Ohio is the second state to produce presidents. Only one other state produced more presidents. Does anybody know which state it was? Virginia. So we want kids to know, and that's why we decided this book is for kids. But right now I'm going to, because I know some of you are standing and tired, but I want Bruce to talk about some of his memorabilia and how he did some of his history. So, ladies and gentlemen, as Johnny would say, here's Bruce.
One of the criteria of the book that neither Nancy and I could be in the book because we're writing it. But yeah, as she said, the way we got started, I basically moved back here in the late 80s, and I opened up my, I have a shop which was my studio, and it became an antique shop, and now I call it a museum, gallery, antique shop and studio. But during the past, I've been back here almost 30 years, I have found there are a lot of interesting people looking through history and collecting history that have come from here. And one of the more recent was, I found this little book from the late 1880s from the big store here in Ottawa. And Mr. John Brown had the store, so I was doing research on John, and I kept getting this leaked Brown, who lived in California, and he wrote all these books that Hollywood made into movies in the 1920s, 30s, and all the way up to the 40s. And in Hollywood history, Leaked Brown, which was John's son, is someone who's known. So I thought, well, that's interesting. And I'm not going to tell you all the details of all these people. We'll be here all day. The book is actually short and sweet, and we have actually left out so much about the different people. But like I was telling Nancy, we could probably write a huge volume on each person. And my first piece here, this is a piece I bought in the 70s, and a lot of you will know Miss Francis of Ding Dong School, and especially if you're over 60, so you're showing your age. But she is considered one of the great pioneers in TV with educating preschoolers. And she had the first show. She got a Peabody Award. She was on four different presidents. She was on their educational committee and advisory. There we go. We can use that.
Yeah.
And so I found this in the 70s when I was working on my master's degree in art, and I was working in an antique shop there in Denver. And I said, oh, I remember her, because I used to watch her on TV. And I came back here, and Mom said, you know, she was from here. I said, no, Mom, we used to watch her on TV here. She wasn't from here. I said, oh, yes, she was. Her family was from here. So a lot of these people I stumbled across. A lot of people came to me with their names and the information and who they were. And some of them are just fascinating, like the first governor, as Nancy was saying, of Oklahoma. His father died when he was 3. He was born in 1860, right outside Leipzig. And his mother, at the age of 10, could not really provide for him, so he went to the Miller family. His name was Haskell. And Mr. Haskell ended up being homeschooled. He didn't even go to school because he was there to provide labor for this farmer and his wife. His wife was a teacher, and her husband was a very intelligent man too, so they homeschooled. And history will go to prove that he became a top lawyer, first in Ottawa, and then got involved in politics. He went out to Oklahoma in 1901, moved his family out there. He became very instrumental. You've heard of an Okie from Muskogee. Well, Muskogee was basically built by Haskell. He was very instrumental. He wanted that to be the capital of Oklahoma, which never happened. But 5 minutes after Oklahoma was sworn a state, November 16, 1907, something like that, he became the governor. And he only served one term, but then he got out, and he went on to the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives. He got very involved in politics, and he almost ran for president at one time. But this is a boy who no one thought he had a chance, and he did very well from Leipzig. And then we have elite Loretta. You know more about Loretta Schindler than I do.
Well, I was going to say Loretta Schindler. It's kind of interesting because during that time, she was one of the first female pilots. Back then, women didn't fly. And it was when she was doing, as a nurse, she was doing a rescue following a tornado in a Midwest state. And it was at that time she said, you know what? We need some kind of air support when a disaster happens. Because think about it, when a tornado happens, trees are down, you can't get to people. And she wanted to start something, you know? And it isn't like everybody jumped on board and said, oh yeah, we're gonna do this. Red Cross thought that's a horrible idea and everything. She had to fight to get this. But she went on and she won the fight and everything. And it's like he said about Frances, females back then, you have to admit, little less power. But because she was the host of the show, she would put up some things like they wanted to get people BB gun advertisers. She said, no, I would not have BB gun advertisers on my show. You know, because that is not a positive thing. And there was several times they wanted to expand it to an hour. She said, no, I don't want kids watching TV for more than half an hour. Can you imagine that nowadays? You know, and they fought her on that. Eventually she got kind of fed up, I'll be honest with you. People don't know this, and she left.
She did leave, yeah.
She left because
after 2 years.
Because they were trying to push her to do things. She was a kindergarten teacher. She knew kids, you know what I mean? That's how she got the
She also had 2 doctorate degrees
yes, but
in
she knew
education
kids, and
child
she knew it was
psychology.
important.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like I said, Loretta, the women back then, they had to fight. It was a little bit harder, but it was from disasters they would see.
But I will add,
I traced her background down her family or anything, have they?
Probably have. I haven't yet. I have to tell you, we did,
Her family?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know where they came from.
yes.
They came from Fort Jennings.
Yeah, they were Fort Jennings. She grew up in Fort Jennings.
What are you
Who was
talking
her
about?
parents at?
I'd have to look that up. I have it at the library, okay, yes.
Who are you talking about now?
Loretta.
Oh, yeah.
We did a lot of research. You know, this book's not real big. But you don't just look at one source and say, okay, we're going to print that. We did a lot of, anybody that's ever done a book's background checks to check dates, to make sure when they were born, where they were born, and sometimes, get this, the internet's wrong. You know, they have a bishop, a different bishop that was supposed to be from Lipsec. I looked it up, no connection to Lipsec at all. References and everything. So that's a part of the book you don't see. And you're going to talk about the astronomer.
Mr. Hiltner.
Yes.
Yeah, he's interesting because when he was young, he was from around North Creek. He and his brother built an airplane up in the attic of their parents' house without the parents knowing. And then when they wanted to bring it out, they couldn't get it out, even taking the wings off. So they had a big long talk with their father, and he was so impressed. He said, "Oh, let's just take the window out, and we'll put a hole in the house so we can get it out." And so he was encouraged to, but he was always wanting to fly. But there's so much about him. He worked for the University of Michigan, and he was very instrumental in designing telescopes. In fact, one of the main telescopes in the USA, which I tried to visit 18 years ago, I had no idea someone from here designed it. It's the MCM, they call it MCM Hiltner telescope. It's outside of Tucson on the top of Mount Kit. And it's just a beautiful location. He picked the location too. It's so clear there. And, it's still an amazing telescope today. And that was built, I don't know if that was 60s, but yeah. But I don't remember everything, believe me.
He was in charge of if you ever heard of the Magellan Project, it was to build a large telescope in a South American country. He was in charge of that. And I have to tell you, he was a major astronomer.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was doing research on him, that was one of my hardest because it said, well, he majored in, and it would have a word this long. Well, you can't put a word this long in a children's book. So I would have to do it, even sometimes the explanation. And one of them, and it's in there, it turned out
There's some things
he
here I
did a
don't
study
understand.
on the temperature of color. Think about that. The temperature of color. But it's a word this long. But that was one of the things. He did all the research. I would have to think in children's level, which I'm good at, because I used to write for a newspaper, okay? And I would have to think in children's level to write it so a child could understand it and everything. And I just couldn't slip a big word in and say, the Magellan Project, that's it. Some of you may know, but I would have to explain this was building a large telescope, you know, in another country, which was a big deal. So that, like I said, he did the research, I did children's research. Is that the best way?
And actually, this is an adult book disguised as a children's book. Okay. So adults can read this too. We made it in big print for those of us over 60, so we can read it to the grandkids or read it ourselves even. And going back to Miss Francis of the Ding Dong School of Fame, when she left the show, there was such an outroar of parents across the nation because she did this show with NBC. It was syndicated. And at that time, in 52, 54, there were only 3 stations on television. So you had 3 choices that they said, "Where's Miss Francis?" And they actually brought her back, gave her everything she wanted, and made her the director of children's programming for NBC, which is quite a feat for a female back in 1954, if you think about it. But and her parents had what we would know as Paul's 5 and 10, which was called the Rappaport store. That's why she was born there. Her parents started that store in the 1890s. They were both very well educated. They were actually both Jewish. One was from Austria, one was from Eastern European, and they met in Finland. Her parents did. And they decided to come to Ottawa to open up a dry goods store. And I'm not going to say a whole lot about a lot of these people, but I want you to look at that bat there. Can you reach that? This is Larry Cox's bat. Larry was a professional baseball player, and he was also a coach, Chicago Cubs, and he was a catcher. He played 3 different teams in his career, and I found this on eBay, and the guy wanted $300 for it, and I said, nobody wants that bat. I told him except me. So I offered him $90, and he gave it to me. But it was in a collection, and it was cataloged. That but they thought enough of this of Larry that they were cataloging a lot of his stuff, and unfortunately he died at just the age of 42. He was back home there, and but that was sad. I remember that. And then I have letters here by America Vespucci Rice. And those of you who know your history know where that name came from America Vespucci. But he was the highest ranking general of the Civil War to come from here. And Sherman said about him, if I had 2 more generals like Americus, the war would not have lasted nearly as long. And but his father had a banking business in Ottawa. They first moved to Kalida when he was 12, and I'm not sure how long they lived in Kalida before they moved to Ottawa. But and I found these photographs of him on the internet, and then I found these letters that he was, one of his businesses was working on the railroads here and improving them and making new lines in Northwest Ohio. And these are a series of letters. He's working with a business partner out of New York City, a Colonel Smith, whom he served with in the Civil War. And these are from the 80s and the 90s. And they're communicating. It's kind of interesting because he talks about the area here and the weather and the mosquitoes and everything that we talk about today. It's hard to work today. It's just too hot. It's too humid, and the mosquitoes are terrible. But another interesting person is our heavyweight boxer, who they call him the Great White Hope around 1910, 1915, and that's because the heavyweight champion from 1908 to 1915 was Jack Johnson, who was a big black man. And this is Jack Dyer, who became known as Jack Denver. He moved out to Denver. But he would come back here and he would box even around here in demonstrations. But I found this on eBay, and then I did more research. And apparently, Jay Johnson, one of the biggest boxers in American history, he would only spar for a whole year with Jack Dyer because he thought he was the best boxer he'd ever fought. But he never fought. They never had a professional fight. And everyone thought that he could beat him. And why didn't it happen? I don't know the politics of the day. But he fought a lot of people who did defeat JJ, I call him, Jack Johnson. And so a lot of people thought that he could have been the world champion. And he was a Leipzig boy, if I remember right. Yeah, Leipzig.
I'm going to just A lot of you may think that we're just talking about dead people. A lot of them are. But after we told people we were putting this book together, I had a lot of people contact me about unique people from Putnam County that are still alive. And you may not know that they're very special and very well known in their field. I'm going to pronounce his name wrong. Jack Devitt from Ottoville. Some of you may know him. And you may think, oh, he did, I don't know. He did books on tools. And in the Toledo Blade, there's a book, they did a story on him. They said he's probably the only man they know of that has done a book on Ohio tools. He's a member of this Ohio Tools thing, and it's got thousands of members, but he's the only one that has done a book on that. So he's well known in his field, and you say he's done books on Indiana too.
He's done 3 books,
Yeah.
and one of them is Indiana tools.
And a person, how many of you go to Gusweiler's? Okay, you've heard of it, okay? Tom Gusweiler collects coin-operated machines, okay? He has written 2 books, and I looked it up. In 2013, he was named to the Coin-Operated Collectors Association Hall of Fame. So people all over the country know him. A matter of fact, they know him so well. It's a little-known secret that David Copperfield, how many of you have heard of him? He collects those machines. He had heard of Tom Gusweiler, and when he was in the area, he came to Ottawa to see his machines. So he's that
I don't
one.
know if you know what these are. They're gambling machines, but they're trade stimulators. During the Depression, if you put a nickel in, and you could win anywhere from no cigars to 3 cigars when cigars were a nickel. That's just one instance. But you were gambling your money and hoping that you would get more produce or whatever, trading for it.
And we didn't talk about, we have a lot of artists. Emerson Burkhart, who's on here, he's in the book. He moved to Columbus. He was from Kalida, world renowned. Okay?
Yeah, here's
Artist.
a
Yes.
book that came out about 10 years ago. And a very good book. And 2 years ago, they had a nice exhibit of his work at the Ohio Historical Society. And if you come to my museum gallery there in Ottawa, I have one of his paintings. It's kind of a satire of a hunter shooting a pretty bird out of a tree who doesn't know how to hold a gun, and the dog's pointing the other way. So he did have a sense of humor. In fact, here's a self-portrait of him, which to me is kind of humorous. But really, he's considered one of the top Ohio artists of the 20th century, if you were naming the top 5.
And there's been a lot of artists and authors from this area. We have a lady named, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, I know, Judy Derbyshire from Columbus Grove. She is a potter and painter, and she lives out in Arizona now, but she has been written up in major magazines because of her work. And we have authors, like we have Karen Odell, who's an author from Vaughnsville. We have Joyce O'Neill Brenna from Lipstick. She's written 6 books. If you go on Amazon and just type her name in, 6 books will come up. Lloyd Harnischfager, how many of you heard of him? He's written books about the Black Swamp and a lot of history. We have, I'm trying to see here. Kind of got some. We have somebody else that's still alive that he's kind of working his way, and he's known in the state, and that's from Fort Jennings, Dick Ricker. You may have just read recently he was named to the Ohio Ag Hall of Fame. How many of you knew that he's also in the Ohio State Hall of Fame? Ohio State Fair Hall of Fame, I'm sorry. So, and I guess one thing we want to read the end. We aren't trying to sell our book. What we're trying to tell kids is, listen to this, kids like you, because what school do you go to? Sarah. What school do you go to? You know what? Logan. Okay.
In Putnam County, sorry, we're.
That's a, do we have any Putnam County kids? Anyway. Okay, what school? Kalida. So do you think growing up in Kalida, oh my gosh, Kalida has so many, I got tired of typing Kalida. We had sports people, you know, Emerson Burkhart. One guy that, he's an artist, I couldn't find it. Think about this. This was something he wrote. I'm supposed to be the writer, but he wrote it. Maybe you know someone who did something that made a difference in the world. Maybe they are remembered by many people today. Maybe they are famous too. There are many famous people yet to be discovered. Maybe you are one of those people. And like I said, the whole purpose of this was to let kids know you can grow up in Putnam County, and as you saw this go through, little towns, homeschooled, graduating classes of 17. Think about that. But yet they didn't let them say, oh, we're a flyover state, we're not going to be famous. But they just follow whatever they were interested in. If it was art, sports, astronomy, help me out here, writing, education.
Science.
Oh, Oscar Velasquez. How many of you heard of him? Oscar, I have it down here. I'm sorry, my brain's not working right today, because he was first on the list. He has done murals. How many towns do you think he's done murals in? 10 towns. And it isn't just little towns. He's been to Findlay, Van Wert, Lima, okay? One of his most recent things is he did a mural in the St. Barbara Catholic Church in Cloverdale. But he didn't know this. Did you also know he wrote 2 books? And one of them is about in South Carolina art. So he's not just known around here, he's known in South Carolina. And I don't know if we should open it up to any questions, because I'm going to turn it over to him. But do you have any questions? We just wanted you to know why we did it, and I wanted you to know the research was done by him, okay?
Not all of them.
Okay. And we're getting near the end, but I want to encourage kids of all ages. You're going to step next door after this is over. We want you to record your history. Little kids can draw pictures. We have, not little kids, but all ages kids can draw pictures, what you like, where you grew up, and things like that. If you're a little bigger, working with the library, we have a little bit more about what you can do. If you're old like me, she has, Ruth with the library has a genealogy thing. She'll help you start putting your genealogy thing together. But remember, history is people, okay? And at all ages, we want you to start writing your history. I don't know if you have anything else. I'm done.
No, this is really to encourage the youth of the county, is what we were focusing on. And as Nancy said, there are a lot more out there. And we hope that this just begins the thinking process of who is out there, who have we forgotten.
Yeah. And we might someday do another book, because we, like I said, you see this list? After we were putting this book together, this is the names we got. And I said not this year. But we also may do an adult book, because like I told you, there is so much background about some of these people that we wanted to keep it short.